and welcome to today's report, the 22nd of August 2025. Okay, so let's start today. Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, Significance, Market Impact, and the 2025 Outlook. Now, the central bankers from around the world gather every August in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. The Jackson Hole Economic Policy Symposium is an annual 3-day conference hosted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, typically in late August at Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Now, this is an invitation-only gathering of top central bank officials, economists, financial ministers, academics, and select market participants to present research papers, give speeches, and debate long-term economic policy issues of global concern. Now, the event was first held in 1978. Moving to Jackson Hole in 1981 to entice Fed Chair Paul Volcker with the area's fly fishing, and has since become the world's most exclusive economic get-together in the words of the New York Times. Now, importantly, Jackson Hole is not an official Fed policy meeting, as there are no formal votes, interest rate decisions, or economic forecasts released here. Instead, it serves as a high-profile forum to policy signals and intellectual exchange. But why is it important? The speeches and discussions are closely watched worldwide for clues about economic trends and the likely direction of monetary policy, especially future interest rates. So now the question I think everyone would like to know is, why is this so important? Right? Now, the Fed chair and other central bankers, right, they have often used Jackson Hole speeches to telegraph policy shifts or new frameworks which investors and economics pass intensely. Now, over the years, there's been several notable moments at Jackson Hole underscoring its significance. Now, in 2010, right, we had the QE2 signals. Facing a fragile post-crisis recovery, Fed Chair Ben Bernanke hinted at a second round of QE during his August 2010 Jackson Hole speech. This strong signal of additional stimulus triggered a sustained stock market rally of about 20% through the end of that year. The Fed indeed launched QE2 a few months later, validating the hint, right? 2014, we had the Euro pivot. At the 2014 symposium, Mario Draghi, president of the ECB, warned about dangerously low inflation in the Eurozone and signaled openness to more aggressive easing. Now, this speech tipped off a major policy pivot in Europe. The ECB would soon embark on large-scale asset purchases, showing that Jackson Hole isn't just about the Fed. Now, nearer, we have the 2020 new inflation framework. August 2020, Fed Chair Jerome Powell used Jackson Hole to announce a landmark change in the Fed's policy approach, a move to flexible average inflation targeting. He outlined that the Fed would allow inflation to run slightly above 2% to make up for the past below target periods, rather than preemptively hiking rates simply because unemployment was low. This was an important strategic shift for the Fed unveiled at the Jackson Hole. Okay, so you can see there is a history of the central bankers using the Jackson Hole as a platform. Now, why is the 2025 Jackson Symposium especially important? There are three factors right here. Number one is policy pivot. There's a possible policy pivot, rate cuts on the horizon. The Fed is at a critical turning point in its interest rate cycle. After aggressively hiking rates to combat high inflation in prior years, the Fed has paused rate changes for most of 2025. The benchmark rate has been held at 4.25 to 4.5% since early in the year. Now, with the economic growth slowing with jobs plus inflation gradually coming down, investors widely expect the Fed to start cutting rates soon. In fact, future markets put the odds of a rate cut in September meeting to be around 80 to 94%. Fed Chair Jerome Powell's speech could provide some insight into whether the Fed is poised to lower borrowing costs in September, effectively setting the stage for the next policy move. If Powell uses a hawkish tone to cast doubt on imminent cuts, it would shake up expectations and likely jolt markets. But if he confirms or encourages the idea of near-term easing, that could reinforce the current market rally. Okay. Number two is the inflation strategy and the economic outlook. Fed isn't just deciding on the next rate cut or hike, its bigger long-term strategy is also being questioned. In 2020, the Fed adopted a policy that let inflation run higher than 2% for a while if it had been too low before. But that approach came under serious pressure in 2022 when inflation suddenly shot above 8%. Many analysts argue this flexible average inflation targeting approach contributed to the Fed being late to tighten policy. Powell is expected to discuss whether Fed is reconsidering its approach to its 2% inflation goal. Now, any hint of a shift, for example, a tougher stance on keeping inflation at 2% or modification to the framework would be very important for how future policy is set. Moreover, the 2025 symposium theme is labor markets in transition, demographics, productivity, and macroeconomic policy, highlighting labor market changes. Now, Powell and others might comment on the balance between a cooling job market and still above target inflation. If Powell sounds optimistic about a strong labor market and worried about inflation, i.e. sticky prices, that will be interpreted as fewer or later rate cuts. But if he emphasizes rising unemployment or easing wage growth along with clear signs of disinflation, that tone will be opening the door to sooner rate cuts. Investors will pay closely attention to every detail because the speech by Powell may reveal more than just whether rates are about to change. It could also show how the Fed overall thinking on inflation and jobs is shifting, a critical moment for the US economy. In short, the symposium may reveal the next chapter of the US economic policy, whether the Fed believes its inflation fight is won or ongoing, and how it will navigate the trade-off between price stability and employment in 2026. Next, and the final one, is the Fed leadership. The conference also carries significant due to the leadership and political context. It's widely expected to be Jerome Powell's last Jackson Hole speech as Fed chair, since his term expires in early 2026, and the current US president has indicated he will not reappoint Powell. So this gives Powell's word extra weight as it's a capstone of his tenure and an opportunity to cement his policy views. Furthermore, the Fed is facing unusual political pressure in 2025. Trump has been publicly pushing the Fed to cut rates faster and even threatening Fed official jobs. Now, just days before, Trump had intensified his pressure by attacking Lisa Cook, a Fed governor, and demanding her resignation over mortgage fraud, rattling some investors. And Powell may use this symposium to subtly assert that Fed's independence and resist political interference. Historically, Fed chairs have sometimes used high-profile speeches to push back against politics, and this setting is ideal for Powell to reinforce that the Fed will make decisions based on data and its mandates, not political demands. So by using Jackson Hole to reinforce this, it shows the Fed independence, and this may calm investors' nerves, a clear signal that policy remains guided by economic data rather than political pressure could help prevent panic selling in both the US dollars and the US equities. So the bottom line is this: all these subplots an approaching leadership transition, political crosswinds, and political policy crossroads make this symposium one of the most important in recent history. Okay, it's more than just a chance to see central banks outside their natural habitat, and what said in this small mountain conference can move markets worldwide. Okay, so uh, the speech by Powell is in a couple of hours. I think in less than 12 hours you have the speech, and that will in a way kickstart everything about the Jackson Hole. So stay tuned and let's see.